Hey guys, welcome back to Central Oregon Recording. I am Scott, one of the co-owners here at the studio. Today, I decided to just put together this quick little live video talking about setting up a live mix, a brand new mix live. So this is something that you can do with any mix. It doesn't matter how big or how small. So these are just a few tips and tricks that I wanted to pass on. So if you're starting something new, let's say you recorded all your parts and you're ready to dive in and start looking at your options for mixing, maybe you're not getting levels set properly, you're having issues hearing things, this should do some quick tricks and help you figure that out. So let's dive in. So let's start here looking at Pro Tools. As you can see, I've got the mix window pulled up. Now this song is by a band called the Sleepless Truckers. This was a demo song they did here for one of our courses. This is called Little Dixie Mafia Hit. So let's look over the tracks that we've got here to start. So as you can see, we've got a kick here, a kick sample, a snare sample, the worst mic. We can explain that in a little bit more detail later. Our overheads, hi-hat side, ride side, and a room mid and side technique. Bass DI, bass mic, acoustic guitar, electric guitar DI, which ended up being our solo. Guitar mic 1 and 2, pedal steel 1 and 2. We've got some pipes and then a vocal. Now this song was pretty much tracked completely live, even though we did have some separation in our rooms and stuff. We did this as live as we could. So let's dive in and really start taking a look at this here. Okay. So one of the first things to check when we're starting a mix is what kind of instrumentation you have and make a decision on where you would like to start. Most of the time, I end up starting at the drums. I like to build my mix around a foundation, but not always. It depends on the song. If we were doing something more ethereal, or let's say more singer-songwriter style, I definitely might start with the vocal. Maybe I'll start with the guitar. It's basically whatever's going to kind of help drive and push the song, or sometimes whatever is most important, which typically is the vocal when we're doing stuff in a song. But sometimes it can be a guitar or something else that maybe has the hook and is holding that. Let's switch over here so you kind of see all the tracks laid out here. So with that in mind, because this is kind of a straightforward country rock kind of style song, we're going to start with the drums. Now, in Pro Tools, there is a specific setting that I like to use when starting out, and that's going here to Options, going all the way down here to Pre-Fader Metering. So pre-fader metering allows you to see the meters, whether your faders are down or not. I'll give you an example here. Let me jump forward in the song a little bit, and I'm going to hit play, and you're going to see the meters jumping, but no audio. So again, there's no audio actually happening there, right? There's nothing coming out because we're not sending anything yet. But this allows us to actually see what's happening. So this is great. So as you can see, we started faders down. So everything's zero, or everything's, basically at infinity. So there's no audio coming out. So we're starting from scratch. We need to build something. So being able to actually visually see what's playing and when it's playing is very, very helpful when starting like this. Now, if we had started with all the faders up, it probably would have been way too loud and been clipping our bus out, and we don't want that at all. We want to be able to actually, get a good level and start from scratch. So let's close this up here, and let's kind of dive in. So again, starting with the drums, since that's our starting point, we need to think about how we hear things. With drums, of course, we've recorded the kick, we've recorded the snare, maybe Had we done a little bit larger setup, we would have done toms, etc. We would have mic'd everything individually, as well as overheads and rooms and all of this extra stuff. Well, the thing is, we don't listen to instruments where we typically place microphones. We don't get down on the floor and stick our head next to a kick drum while the drummer is playing. But that's where we put a microphone because we're trying to capture the essence of that one specific drum. But we have overheads and we have room mics. This is where we get most of our overall tone for the instrument. Because again, we hear this instrument in a space. We hear everything in a space. So when we close mic something, we're just capturing the essence of that one specific instrument, but we're not getting the overall picture. So when I start with drums, I like to start with the overheads and the rooms. The overheads are an overall picture of the entire kit, right? That's why they're called overheads. They capture overhead of the drum. So not only the cymbals, but the snare, the kick, the toms, this squeaky chair that they happen to be sitting on at the time. All of that stuff gets picked up by the overheads. So let's start there and we'll see what happens. Okay, so there, we've got overheads. Let's look at the rooms. There, right away, that sounds like our room that's downstairs where we recorded this. So we've already instantly put it in a space by using a mid-side room technique on this. Now, of course, we could, dial this out. Let's say you didn't have a room. Well, we can make one later on. But let's keep going for now. We'll start with just the overheads and we'll start adding in all the extra mics. Okay, now you're probably wondering how I'm setting the levels. It's like, how do you know when to stop? How do you know when it's loud enough? One, practice, lots and lots of practice. But two, having your monitoring system set up properly. So I've got a few things going on I want to explain. First thing is, granted, I've been doing this for a while, so I know where I like my volume at. I know what sounds big or what, how it's supposed to sound as loud as it is. But I have this also set up so I can visually see what's going on. So if I turn off our pre-fader metering here, I'm going to hit play again. So one, I'm using my ears, but two, I'm also looking at the metering. So on this specific metering, I'm using the K system. So in Pro Tools, if you right click on the actual metering bar, you can see you have all these extra choices. You can see I'm set to K20. So the K metering system was set up by a gentleman by the name of Bob Katz. This was to kind of help set up, I guess, an overall, a generalization between the audio side of the world and the film side of the world. So this gives us, basically a good starting point. Typically, this is on sample peak, which looks like this. So where our 0 is up here. If you notice with the K20, the 0 is all the way down here. So the different numbers, 20, 14, 12, is how much headroom you have from the 0 point on the meter. So it's from 0, how much extra decibels you have till you reach digital 0. The reason I like using the K system is it's very similar to an RMS or to a VU meter. So VU meters, the 0 point on a VU meter is typically -18. So if true digital 0 is clip, or is the peak, or is when we start to clip inside a DAW digitally, and we go -18, we go 18 decibels down from that, that's where a VU would hit. Now with sample peak, while it does show you some averaging, it's mostly after the peak. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, now I'm going to switch it back to K20. So you notice the metering is much slower. Now, not all DAWs have this ability. You can't always switch these over. It depends on your DAW. There are, of course, plugins you could buy. You could get a VU meter. Like if I go in here, let's see here. Let's go to, oh, where are you? Let's go into here. Let's go find this one, MV meter. So here we go. This is by TB Pro Audio. So here, let's look at a VU style meter. So you see that set on peak. We have, see, RMS -20, which would be similar to a K20, 14, 12, EBU, VU, and PPM. So if we watch a VU meter, so let's look at the VU compared to this meter here, which is what it's actually on for the CATS setting. So not bad. So let's look at an RMS 20. So you see, this is definitely similar to what we've got going on. But the whole reason I use a slow metering system like this is it allows me to see the average level. Now, when working with drums, drums are a very transient and percussive instrument, so they have a lot of big peaks. So trying to get your RMS up on drums can be really difficult. Something that I typically just kind of shoot for and listen to the transients, so like the snare hit or the kick or whatever's going on. Now, if we look at our main meter over here, when I play this, so you see like that, I'm hitting around the +12, or on this one, almost the +8. So like that, I'm leaving myself about 8 dB of headroom because we still have more stuff to put in. So if you're not sure, if you're unsure about your listening environment, that you're not sure how loud things actually are, or you need some kind of visual aid, using a slower metering system can really help you to understand what's going on. Now, again, with drums, they're percussive. There's not a lot of saturation typically, and not a lot of compression going on to bring up the lower levels. So we have to be careful with those. But let's keep going here. So far, we've gotten our kick, our snare, and our overheads in. So again, I've turned up the kick and snare so that they sound and represent well with the overheads. And I'll take them in and out here. So you see like the snare fills out a little bit more. Of course, the kick is there a lot more because we've got an actual capture of the kick drum, etc. So let's look at our worst mic. So the worst mic is a technique going in between the toms over the kick drum, pointed at the snare or at the drummer's crotch. So crotch mic, dick mic, worst mic, like a bratwurst. These are all different names for this, but typically you can use a dynamic or a condenser. You point it kind of at that, you space it between the toms, trying to get it in a good position. This should give you an overall sound of the drum set. So let's blend this one in. So let's see what that sounds like by itself. Okay, with the overheads. Just helps add a little bit more attack to everything. Now you notice so far, everything is still panned up the center. We haven't panned anything. So I'm doing everything in mono. And the reason for that is I want things to kind of blend together as best as they can in a mono setting. Because once I start panning things out, then I can start adding space and depth to things. So if I can get it sounding fairly blended together in a mono situation, when I switch to stereo, that's just going to add even more space for all the instrumentation. So let's keep going here. Let's look at our kick and snare samples here. So right away, just putting in that kick sample, you hear it has crazy attack compared to our normal kick. Let's listen to the two. So the reason I picked this specific sample is for the attack. It was something that I felt that, of course, we didn't really capture with the original kick drum, the one that we actually mic'd. So I needed something to supplement. Now you notice I'm not replacing this, right? I haven't replaced the other kick drum with this kick sample. I'm blending the two together because the kick sample has something I want and the actual recorded kick has something I want. So I'm augmenting the whole thing. Same thing with the snare. Let's look at that one. I'll solo these up. Sample first. Now, granted, it may not sound very good just as it is with that snare. It will sound a lot better. But the thing with using the actual snares, we do get bleed, but we also get all the ghost notes, the things that the sample probably didn't pick up. Now, we could have gone through and tried to program all that in, but I just wanted some good like one-shots of the snare drum because I'm going to use this not only blended, but also to drive effects for the drums. So this will be my effect driver for when I go into, saying, putting a plate or something on the snare. That way we get a nice clean reverb every single time. I believe it's Bob Clearmountain was one of the ones who definitely did this a lot, or does this a lot, using a sample to drive reverb. All right, so let's keep going here. So the last part we have, of course, are the rooms. So let's start blending those in. All of a sudden, it just opens up, right? It sounds great. It's sounding like a actual drum set in a room, the way that we want it to sound. So this is something that's really fun to do. And now, of course, if you don't have a room to record in that sounds like this, we need to make one. So I'll bring these back down. Let's look at making a room. I'm going to grab all of these right here, and we are going to send them all to a new track. And it's going to be an aux, stereo aux. We're just going to call it drum room. Okay, so let's see what we got here. So the drum room, I'm going to bring it over here so we can compare. So let's grab a reverb. I'm just going to grab a stock reverb here, which is D-verb here in Pro Tools. And we'll put it on room 2, medium room, 750. Let's dial this down a little bit. Actually, see what the small is like. Small. Okay, let's try this. This is roughly the size of our room. Pre-delay. Okay, so this hopefully sounds similar to our room. It won't sound exactly the same because it's not our room. But let's look at this here. Sure this is going to the right place so you can hear it. Okay. So now all of a sudden everything here is going to this new room send. So I'm sending the levels that I've got here to this room. So I'm going to dial this down and let's see what happens when I blend it in. Not bad. Let's bring up our other rooms here. And let's contrast and compare these. So let's see what we get here. So I'll start with the drum room and then we'll switch to our actual recorded drum room. So again, the rooms do sound a little bit different, but we get the basic idea. The only thing I'm not really digging right now on this drum room specifically is the low end. I'm gonna boost this up so we can listen to just that one. Let's get rid of our other rooms. So you can hear how much low end, how much that kick is adding. So you say, oh, well, let's just not put the kick in. Well, I do want to put the kick in there because in a room, the kick would still be there in the room, but the room might have certain things going on that maybe get rid of that. So we can play with that by adding an EQ before the reverb. So if we come into here, I'm just going to grab stock EQ. So this is a stock 7-band EQ, really simple. I'm only going to use the high pass and the low pass filters here. So let's kick these in. And I'm going to set these to about 12 dB per octave. And I'm going to take this up, let's go about 150. Let's try that. Let's see what this sounds like. There, I take it in and out. You could hear how much low end added back in. The issue with having low end and reverb like that is it can muddy up the clarity of your low end. So you start to lose definition between the kick and the bass. We don't want that. We want to keep that definition. We could even go up a little bit further. Let's go to around 200. And I'm going to actually pull the top down as well. Let's go around 8K-ish, something around there. Let's see what that sounds like. Just helps kind of focus it in a little bit more, which is really nice. Now, this is an actual technique. This gets referred to as the Abbey Road technique. The idea of putting an EQ before your reverb. So you're EQing exactly what you want to be represented into the reverb. The reverb is going to add its own EQ anyway. It's going to have a specific tone to it. Some of them actually have settings on them so you can adjust the EQ after the fact, so after the reverb. But like this, we want to do it before. So we're really taming and toning and honing in on exactly what we want that reverb to hear. So from here, the last thing you could do is, if you want to, you can start to look at adding compression. So let's look here. I'm going to grab stock compressor, which is the dynamic, there it is, Dynamic 3. So let's see what happens when I compress this. All right, so decent amount of compression. I'm gonna speed this up a little bit here. Let's go super, super fast. Around 40. I'm actually going to increase our release here. We're going to go like 800. And I'm going to take our knee up. So now, just real quickly, faster attack, the more transient it's going to catch. The longer the release, the longer it's going to hold on before it actually lets go. Our knee is basically how soft it's going to be. If it's going to be hard compression, so once it hits the threshold, it's immediately going to start compressing, or if it's going to start a little bit before and slowly and gradually increase as we go into it. So I've kind of set this up as a nice, smooth, and kind of slower released compressor. Okay, I'll take it out. So you notice how it just kind of tames that a little bit. Oh, looks like I had a quick question here. Let's see here. Would you recommend we listen through some speakers or headphones to really hear the difference? You know, speakers or headphones, really. Even like cheap earbuds are going to make a difference than like on a phone. I always suggest it. You kind of get the binaural idea. Speakers can be great if you have reference speakers. You shouldn't have to worry about it too much. But yeah, definitely headphones. Always headphones if you can. Headphones are definitely key, as much as you can at least. All right. So with the compression on here, the compressor right now is really kind of taming that snare drum. The snare drum's the biggest hit, right? So let's listen. Okay, I'll bypass it. So you hear how much that snare drum sticks out when we don't have this compressor on here. So the compressor is actually helping tame the snare drum in the reverb. Now it sounds crazy, but it kind of gives us a more even response. That way that snare drum's just not poking out like crazy. It's like that. It sounds like it's in a space now. Now we could probably dial this back. I have this up quite a bit. Like that. I'm just adding a little bit of space around the drums, just enough. So this is an easy way to do that. Because again, we're working with space, right? We need to fit that inside a space. So now we have a different room. So we have our rooms, we have this room. So for this one, I'm just going to mute it out for now, and we'll use the rooms we have. All right. So again, let's look at our levels on everything. I'm going to play it and we'll kind of look this over. So you see, I'm not going super loud with this. Even if I switch this over, let's look at this in a sample peak mode. So you see, I'm staying under, right? I'm not trying to crank it up. We can always turn it up louder. Granted, we can always turn it down too, but it's easier to turn things up a little bit and to gain things up, especially at the back end here. All right, so we've kind of got this rough idea. Now, again, you got to use your ears for a lot of this, but the visuals do help. But you have to train your ears. The visual is there to help you kind of understand and help you, in the best sense, make sure that your ears are hearing what they actually are hearing, to teach them. So we've got a good level on the drums. So from here, the next step I personally would take would be going to the bass. We've got our foundation, right? Our rhythm section of the drums. Now we need to add the bass in because I need that bass to start to lock in with the kick drum. So let's look at those. Now real quick, I'm going to take this off so we can talk about something. So I'm going to start with the bass DI and blend this in with the drums here. Okay, let's look at the bass cabinet. Didn't sound like it got louder, did it? So let's look at the bass. So what's going on with the bass? We'll grab the bass DI first. We'll listen to that, and then we'll listen to the microphone that was on the cabinet. Well, they sound pretty good. Let's see what they sound like together. Sound like all the bass went away. Let's try that again. We'll start with the DI just by itself. We'll listen. I'll add the bass microphone in, and we'll see what happens. So we kind of lost some of the low end on our bass. So the reason for that is phase. So you see I have a VMR right here. All I have in here is a trimmer, and you see the trimmer, the phase reverse is flipped up to 180. So I'm flipping the phase on one of the microphones. So let's see what happens when I activate this while this is playing. Wow, bass. So what happened when we captured the direct input versus the mic on the cabinet, for whatever reason, one of these had its phase flipped. And because of that, these don't line up. Well, they do line up. They line up almost so perfectly that they almost cancel each other out. So something to be aware of is always checking the phase when you have two of the same instrument. So like that on guitar microphones, on bass DI versus a mic, if you have two on an acoustic guitar, if you have two on a vocal, whatever it is, you got to check that. You got to make sure that those are working properly. So we've got that. So let's see what that sounds like now with the drums. So all I did there was just make this a group. So now I should be able to move these a little bit. Okay. So what I'm after here is still being able to hear the kick drum, but have that bass kind of supporting from underneath. So I want to feel and hear the punch coming through, and then that bass just kind of sitting underneath. So like that, every time that kick drum is hitting, we're still hearing the pat, 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 pat from it. And we're kind of feeling a little bit of that low end punch, but that bass is now underneath, kind of supporting and filling in the rest of it around it. So that's definitely what we want. You know, we want to feel and hear the kick drum poking out and then have that bass underneath. So it's almost like the kick drum is pushing the bass, or the bass is around the kick drum and they're kind of pulsing together. That's what we want to hear. Next part, we want to look at the acoustic and the guitar. So let's start with the acoustic here. Now again, nothing's panned yet. We haven't panned a single thing. We are still working in mono right now. All right. So the great thing with this is on this specific song, the acoustic guitar is more of a rhythmic instrument. It's not a super huge feature of the song. It's there to provide a little jangle, just a little rhythmic action, so everyone else kind of follows along with that. So with this, we don't really have to worry too much about it, you know, being overly pronounced. It's there to hear the chicka chicka basically of it. All right, let's keep looking. Let's look at our guitars here. All right, let's add the pedal steel. That's great. We can kind of hear everything. All right, let's add in our vocal.
Said it was around a double-out buck. Everybody knew Johnny didn't hunt.
All right, there it is. I mean, it's that simple. So again, we haven't panned anything yet. We just left everything as it is. So now we can start looking at panning. So we've got pretty much everything set. We'll deal with the pipes a little bit later because they're at the beginning of the song. So we'll get there. Last thing we need to do, of course, is the solo, but let's look at panning first. So again, because we use the drums as our basis, we're kind of fitting everything around that. We fit the bass around the kick drum, and then we made sure that the guitars and everything were kind of up and over the cymbals and everything, but just still kind of fitting in that range. I mean, we listen to music on a daily basis. We understand the concept behind how to place or like the volume things should interact at, because we listen to music consistently. We just have to pay a little bit more attention when we're listening to really place those things and make sure they sound the way we need them to sound. So looking at panning, we'll start with drums. Now, we don't have a lot to pan here. We've got a kick and we have a snare. Typically, those are up the center. We want those in the center of the sound. The worst mic, center as well. We have our overheads here. So with the overheads, we kind of have a decision to make. We have two ways of panning things. That is audience perspective and drummer's perspective. The idea is audience perspective is how we would see a drum kit from the audience, compared to drummer's perspective, what it looks like or would sound like behind the drummer's seat. Most music is panned audience perspective because most engineers aren't drummers, so they don't hear it that way. They typically look at the drum set while it's playing, so we hear it that way, which means that the hi-hat would be put on the right-hand side, and then from there, it would go from the highest tom to the right, highest tom from the right all the way over to the left-hand side, which would be the lowest tom. As a drummer, if I was sitting here behind a drum set, my hi-hat would be here, and then a tom, and another tom, kick and snare, cymbals. So if you're looking at me and my hi-hat's here, the hi-hat's on my left ear as a drummer, but to you as an audience member, you'd be looking at the hi-hat on your right side. So this really comes down to preference. Sometimes it comes down to what the band wants or if you want to do a stylistic thing. So for me, I typically go audience perspective because I am not a drummer, so I typically hear things. So I'm going to pan these out. And I'm going to pan these out to roughly 60% here. So with Pro Tools, you have 0, which is center, all the way to 100, which is fully panned out. Now, when working with these are my thoughts on the whole panning situation. Everything is typically encompassed in something else, right? So the overheads, I totally panned the wrong one. The overheads typically encompass the entire drum kit, right? So the overheads sit over the drum set and they hear everything. They hear the kick, they hear the snare, they hear the toms, all the cymbals, everything. But those overheads are capturing the drum set pretty much without a room tone. I mean, there might be a little bit there, but just the drums. Now, those drums are located in a space inside the room. So I don't pan the overheads out 100% because the overheads are still encompassed into something. They're encompassed into a room, into a space. So I typically like to put the space as the widest thing, the 100%. So fully panned left, fully panned right. That's the space that we're in. And everything else slowly comes in. So from the space that we're in, we come into the overheads. And then from there, we have the kick, snare, toms, etc., close mics. So everything kind of comes down from that. The only things I typically like to pan out super wide would be maybe keyboards, sometimes synthesizers, maybe guitars, electric guitars. If we're going into the chorus or something and we have another set of guitars, then I'll pan those super wide. That way, when the chorus hits, it feels like everything opens up and gets wider and what wraps around you bigger. But like this, we'll go 60%. So let's see what that sounds like with just the drums. So no rooms. All right, so I'm going to throw a quick little tool on here so we can really hear the difference between some things. Just have to find it. There you are. I don't know if Brainworks still offers this as a free plugin. They might. This is their BX Solo. So the BX Solo is a little tool that allows us to like solo the mid, solo the sides. It also allows us to adjust stereo width here, swap left and right. Really fun and useful tool. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put this into mono mode. So we are now, every time this is on, we'll be hearing a mix in mono, and we're just listening to the drums. So the only thing we panned were the overheads, and then I'll bypass it and we'll listen to it in stereo. So when things panned out. So here it is. So hopefully, listening on headphones or speakers, you can hear that when this plugin was on, everything seemed to be in the center. You could hear the hi-hat, cymbals, etc. Everything seemed to be here. But as soon as I let go, just slightly, it just opened up a little bit. All of a sudden, there was like some space. You could kind of hear the hi-hat move over a little bit, and there's some space. So let's add the rooms in. So same idea. It's in mono right now. And when I hit the bypass button, it'll shrink. Or sorry, when I hit the bypass button, it will come from the center and it will come back out. So there, yeah. So it just kind of opens it up. So those rooms just add that extra little space on the outside of the overheads. So let's keep going here. So now the next thing we can look at are the guitars here. Now with this, because these guys play it live a lot, they definitely have a way that they set up and sound. But the acoustic guitar here is played by the lead singer. So for this, I still don't want this to get in the way of the vocalist, but I don't want to pan it crazily. So I'm just going to take it and we're just going to go like 15. That's it, 15. Now, some people will talk about mixing in what they call LCR. That's left, center, and right. So the reason for this typically was on old consoles, you had a button that could put something in the left, in the center, or the right. If you wanted to pan something, this is especially true for certain old Neve boards, you had to actually engage a pan pot. Now, when you did that, sometimes the level would actually drop and it wouldn't sound the same. And then when you started to pan it around, so they ended up mixing like in LCR, left, center, right. I don't typically do LCR mixing because you have a whole stereo spectrum and I like to use it. I like to place things in specific areas. So when you close your eyes and you're listening, it feels as though, or sounds as though, things are just off center a little bit, or just so, to kind of add some space. So let's start there. For the guitars, again, I'm going to pan these actually pretty hard. We'll go like 50% on these. That should be pretty good. And then because I panned the electric guitar one way, I'm actually going to pan the pedal steel the opposite. They do play similar things, but they do switch off a little bit as well. So we'll just kind of do that. And actually, I'm going to go a little bit further with this one. We'll go kind of closer to the drums. I'm going to bring this one in a little bit. Now, the reason for this, the guitarist did all of his solos on another track, which is what we have here, the guitar DI. So this is his rhythm track, the green, and then the blue here is his solo. With the pedal steel, he did everything on those tracks. So when he solos, I don't want it to sound super wide. I want it to be a little bit closer to the center. Now, you could automate this. You could automate this to pan in when he solos and then pan back out. For now, I'm just going to leave it right there. And then for the solo, I'm going to pan it off just a little bit. There. And we'll bring this up roughly there. Okay. So same idea. Let me go grab that plug-in again. Whoop. Not that far. There we go. So with it bypassed again, things will be panned. We'll actually hear space, and then I'll bring it back into the center. So we'll start with it, everything monoed, as we had it before, and then I'll spread it out. Here we go.
Said it was around a double-out buck. Everybody knew Johnny didn't hunt. How Jimmy Wayne's shop burned down to the ground. It was 35 miles just south of Blacktown. He was cooking that crank, that's how he died. But how'd he chain the doors from the outside?
Like that, everything just all of a sudden has space. So now let's look at our levels. Hit play again. So again, we're not peaking completely yet. And our average seems to be sitting around there. So let's switch this to sample peak and see what it looks like in a typical metering setup. Tell you what, I'm going to change the master here to a K20. So we have a sample peak on the sub master, and then the master is in a K20. So we can really see the difference here between these two metering systems. And again, I like the K system because it is slower. Not all DAWs can change this, but you kind of get an idea of what I shoot for on a meter that's slower and set up like a K20 compared to a sample peak. So you see the K system is a lot slower, so you really get to see what's going on. The sample peak jumps a lot. Now, if you're used to this, it's really easy. So the biggest thing I say is pick a metering system and stick with it. You can see that there's so many different metering systems in here. The biggest thing is just to pick one and stick with it. Personally, for me, I like the K system. It's really easy to use, and that's what I stick with using. And then this really helped me start to understand how loud things are. You know, a big part of that is mixing at a certain level for a certain amount of time. So you pick something that's decently loud for you when you start mixing, and you kind of stick with that to get everything leveled out properly. And then you can start to like maybe drop your volume and listen low, turn up really loud and like get it blasting and blaring for a little bit. Don't do it super long. You don't want to damage your ears, and go back and forth. But you'll typically find, you'll start to find a space where immediately as you pull up a track or you start to turn things up, like, okay, that's good. Like, you know, from listening at that level for so long that this is where it should be. It should sound level right here, and it sticks right there, and then you're good. It's just practice. It's just practice, practice, practice. That's the biggest thing with this. All right. So that's pretty much it. We've leveled out everything, and well, I guess we haven't done the pipes yet. We'll go do those. Yeah, and that's it. Like, we're not clipping. We don't need to get super loud. The great thing with this, we can always gain it up here. So like if I swap this out, let's just grab a dynamics processor here. Come all the way down here. Let's grab this guy. And I'll set this up real quick. And we'll start about here. All right, let's see. So with this, because again, we weren't clipping, so let's see what this does. First off, way too much on the threshold. Let's bring that back.
Said it was around a double-out buck. Everybody knew Johnny didn't run.
It's like that. With one dynamics processor, we can slightly control snare drums and hits and things like that, and we can turn it up there. So you don't have to worry that much about pushing the level super hard to your submaster. We can always turn it up. We can always grab all the tracks and just bump them up a little bit too, or put another plugin on and gain it up. So it's always better to be a little bit under than it is to go over, because as soon as you start clipping, you'll start hearing distortion and things. Now, unless you're going for that, which certain types of music you can, it's typically not good, because again, you're clipping your converters that are coming out, and digital clipping doesn't typically sound as good as actual like analog saturation through transformers and tape and all of those transistors and all that kind of stuff. We like the sound of that because it's typically rounds off and saturates, where digital distortion basically cuts off the top of the wave and makes it a square wave, and it sounds kind of nasty, unless you're going for that kind of sound. But I digress. Okay, so that's the basics of just kind of setting up. You know, we didn't do a lot. In fact, if I get rid of this drum room here, you can see the only plugin we used was something to flip it, and we went from, you know, a basic mix to this. Now let's go look at our pipes in the beginning real quick just to set those. All right. So like that. For these, they're a background sound, so they don't need to be super loud. And I want them to be under that acoustic guitar when it comes in, and that's literally it. Now, these were samples. As you can see, they are stereo samples. There it is. Yeah, that's... I think, is there anything else we really need to go over? We pretty much got it. So the next thing we're going to do after this is really start looking at adding space to things. But that's the basics of just kind of setting your levels there. The only other thing I could really talk about is maybe clip gain here. Most DAWs have clip gain anymore. So if you notice real quick, let's just look at our bass guitar. You see that we've got one down here at almost -13 and one all the way up here at -5. So that's a pretty big difference in level. But if we go and actually look at these, let's make these a little bit bigger. You can see, here's the bass DI. This is the one that's turned down to -13. And here is the bass microphone. You can see it's not quite the same visually. So clip gain can be a way you can level things out a little bit. If you want to try something a little different, is actually turning up the gain here. So the only thing I have to watch is like these peaks here. They might get a little much. But if we turn this up, say about that much, let's see how much that, so that should have turned this up by 5. So now if I bring this down by 5 dB, now they should be a lot closer in level. So let's go look. Yep, looks great. And if we take it back, and we'll boost this up back to the 5 dB that it was. So same idea. So all you're doing is you're actually changing the gain on here. There are some people that like to mix this way where they use the clip gain. That way they can keep their faders closer to 0. And the reason to keep your faders closer to 0 is how fine tune you can get when you get closer to 0. So if I grab a fader here and drop it down here to negative, you can see that from there, like 80, 70, 60. So I didn't move very much to get to 60. So we jumped from infinity, which is like negative, looks like maybe negative 118 or maybe negative 120, somewhere around there. And then we go, so from 117 to 160, you know, it's about the size of my cursor. So now if we go up to 0 and I move about the size of my cursor, we're like 4 dB, maybe. So you can see as you get closer to the 0 point, you have more finite control over how much you're doing. So some people like to have that set all of their faders at 0 and then use the clip gains. That way they can keep their fader steady. There is no right or wrong way. You can do it however you want. That is just another way to kind of set levels that just gives you like that more finite control with the fader. Again, like most of these, you can see negative 10, negative 9, negative 12 and a half, 8, 5, 13, 10. So nothing's really below like that 20 mark. So I'm just kind of in that range to keep things looking good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just setting basic levels. That's all it really is. You know, use the visual cues you have. Don't clip your output. You don't want that kind of distortion. It will sound bad. And use your ears and use common sense. I mean, it's really comes down to just you listen to music every day. We all do. That's part of life. That's the great thing about, you know, about all of this. So use your knowledge and what you listen to every day to set your levels and trust yourself. The more you do this, the better you'll get at it, the more you'll trust your ears. Just keep at it and have fun. All right, guys. So again, the next video I do on this, we will probably start diving into using effects, reverbs, delays, adding space to things. Because again, we don't listen to things with our ears up on cabinets or on drums. We listen to them in rooms. We will work on that and keep building this mix. And then from there, we'll start looking at EQ, compression, all the fun stuff that we can start diving into to make this even better. All right, guys, hope you had fun and enjoyed watching this. Feel free to always leave comments on things that you want us to try and go over. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. You can hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell. That will inform you every time we release a new video. We'll be doing a lot more here coming up soon. So anything from tips and tricks inside the computer to outboard stuff to recording things. We've got a lot of videos in the pipeline coming. Yeah, we will catch you guys next time. Thanks.